From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Coming up today, K-State's Romulo Lollato will discuss the progress of the winter wheat crop in Kansas, which varies considerably depending on whether or not that crop was planted before our persistent rainfall in October. He'll also talk about the chances of crop damage from the unseasonably cold temperatures of the past week. Also, K-State's Chad Paulk will talk about the acclaimed Feed Science and Management program here at the university, whose graduates are in high demand in this growing segment of the grain industry. He'll go over the career opportunities and what the program entails. And K-State's Charlie Lee on a new study of the effects of neonicotinoid insecticide use on bobwhite quail populations. All this and more here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Good to have you aboard for another Agriculture Today. The wheat planting season in Kansas is all but complete. Now it's a good time to step back and assess just how well that crop looks. Romulo Lollato has joined us once more, wheat production specialist, K-State Research and Extension, and we'll tap him for his thoughts on not only the state of winter wheat in Kansas, but what these really cold temperatures, unusually so for this early in the fall, may have brought to bear on the wheat crop. But just going back a bit, Romulo, this crop got off to a pretty good start if one got planted in time ahead of the rainfall.
Hi, Eric. Yes, well, thinking about the Kansas wheat crop this year, we have two very different scenarios, right? We have about 55-60% of the fields that got planted before all that rain in October. Then we have a very large gap in planting progress around the state in between October 5th and about October 20th or about 23rd or so. And then it seems like the remaining fields kind of got planted opportunistically after that, right? There was just so much rain in between that October 5th and October 22nd, 23rd that with the exception of some fields in western Kansas, we were pretty much just waiting for it to dry out. So we have those two very different conditions, right? The fields that got planted early, for the most part, they had excellent moisture coming up. We even saw excessive moisture in many times, causing some crusting for fields that got planted just in conventional tillage practice, just before the rain. If these fields were lucky enough, a couple weeks later there was another rainfall that kind of softened up the surface, and we're still seeing very decent stands, even in fields that got crusted in the beginning. In some bottom parts of the fields, we also saw waterlogging, and we saw there are fields, especially in the bottom parts of them, that we don't have much of a good stand. So pretty variable, right? And then we have that second, almost 40% of the fields that got planted after October 22nd around the state. That was also planted opportunistically because there were rains here and there. So whenever there were a few days of dry weather, producers were taking advantage, right? And I was getting questions from producers as late as November 2nd, November 3rd, should I still be planting?
Getting close to the edge there.
Getting really close to the edge, definitely. In some cases where producers were actually in south-central Kansas or perhaps even southeast part of the state, I was still recommending them, yes, let's go ahead, increase those seeding rates. If you have the chance to put some in-furrow phosphorus fertilizer as well, that can really help. But now we're definitely getting to a point that I think the fields that were supposed to be planted are or should have been planted already. From here on, it's getting pretty late for us to get a good wheat crop.
And for those fields that were planted quite late, if they haven't, for whatever reason, emerged yet, is that a worry at this point in time, Romulo?
Well, there are many times that we see fields that get planted in the fall not emerge until the spring, right? And as long as the seed is still viable, it should be okay. Now, what's happening this year is that the seed has germinated because we had moisture, right? So it's a different situation than if you're planting in a dry soil and it doesn't get moisture until next year, and then you get moisture in the spring and it comes up because the seed is still dry and viable. Now, the way that the crop, or the situation that the crop was planted into this year with moist soils, there's a very large likelihood that it's already emerging. Mm-hmm. So ideally, we will see this crop actually emerge here in the next couple of weeks, so it can actually benefit from sunshine, right, over the winter and maintain the plant alive. So I guess as long as we as it emerges and have one or two leaves now, I mean, we're going to be more exposed to winter kill if we don't have 3 to 5 tillers, but at least the plant will be able to produce some sugars and to maintain or stay alive through the winter.
For those stands, then, that did get planted in a timely fashion, emergence was good, moisture was plentiful. Then the last several days, we've seen abnormally cold temperatures for early November set in. How has that impacted those established stands? You actually have an article out on that.
Yes, actually, we worked with the Kansas Maisonette to try and take a look at what was the extent of that temperature drop from how much it actually went in just an interval of about 7 days or so. And when we look around the state, so if we get a couple of different extremes, like for example in Cheyenne, the temperatures dropped from about 55 in November 5th to, well, a couple of different mornings where temperatures were about 20s in November 10th and November 12th again. So there was a steep drop in temperature there. And in that part of the state, the crop typically got planted in a good, timely fashion, right? So we can see some leaf burn in those fields for sure because of that drop in temperature. If we look at south-central part of the state, like Harper County, for example, then we're looking at temperatures dropping from about 70 degrees or so to close to 25, perhaps 20. There on November 10th, they got pretty cold, right? So it was a little bit of a steeper curve there, but again, the crop didn't get planted until later. So in many fields, the crop isn't even out of the ground yet. So and depending on the extent of that temperature drop and depending on when the crop was planted, we can expect different consequences of this temperature drop.
Some of the variables at work here, well, the moisture and even snow cover where it was still in place would help, as would the still warm, relatively warm soil temperatures, right?
Yeah, so definitely that snowfall will definitely help, right? So we had anywhere 2 to 3 inches, depending on where in the state, of snow cover. And despite air temperatures near 20, that helped maintain soil temperatures at much higher levels than that. If we think of the soil moisture that we have, that also helps maintain soil temperature. So it provides the soil with a greater buffering capacity. In other words, it takes longer for us to see any soil temperature when the soil is moist as compared to a dry soil. So I think those two things, the snowfall that we had and the moisture levels, probably helped us at this point in time to at least ensure that we don't have a winter kill this early. Now, that doesn't mean the soil temperatures didn't go down. If we look at the Maisonette stations as well, and we're measuring soil temperatures at 2 and 4 inch depth, we'll see that in that same period of time, from the 5th of November to the 12th, soil temperatures also went down, probably from a mid-40s to mid-50s there, depending where in the state, to not lower than about 33 to 35 Fahrenheit. So actually, in these last 7 days, the coldest soil temperature was actually measured was 33 Fahrenheit. So that gives us more confidence that the crop should be fine, at least up to now, regardless of when it was planted, right? That crown would be protected by the soil, and the soil temperature didn't really get much lower than 33, 35 Fahrenheit.
If, for some reason in a specific area of a field, there was damage, though, what would producers need to be looking for? What would be the initial symptoms that would suggest even a mild case of winter kill here?
Well, typically the first thing that we'll see is actually a burn down, right? We're going to see, especially in areas of the field, maybe areas that had higher residue, right? For example, one of the things that we see quite often is when the residue out in the back of the combine is not well distributed, right? So if we're planting after a soybean field, and the residue is just not well distributed. We have a thick layer of residue, neighboring thinner layer of residue. We typically see those burn down being much worse where that residue is thick. Now, that's probably because the crown will actually be formed much closer to the surface, right? So if we think of how the crown develops, right, first the coleoptile comes out of the seed. When the coleoptile reaches sunlight, then the crown is going to be formed roughly perhaps 1 inch below the point where the coleoptile saw the sunlight. So if the coleoptile needs to go through a thick layer of residue until it reaches sunlight, that means that the crown is going to be formed closer to the soil surface. So there's a larger chance for us to see any potential winter kill where there is that heavy residue. Also, other situations where we typically see these fields being more exposed to potential burn down from cold snaps like these would be, again, no-till, perhaps planted in somewhat wet soils when we were not able to close the furrows very well. So we don't get a very good seed-to-soil contact, and so that the plant is going to be exposed to those colder temperatures just because we didn't close the furrow very well, and we didn't get a very good seed-soil contact. So typically in some of these no-till fields with heavy residue, we tend to see or to be at least more exposed to potential winter kill. So I think overall, up to now, I'm not overly concerned with potential winter kill for this crop. We will need to keep an eye. So here in the next 7 days or so, especially once temperatures warm up a little bit more, we will need to keep an eye and see if we're going to see some of that burn down, which is very likely, but hopefully no winter kill.
Well, producers, if you'd like to read a bit more about the potential impact of these recent cold temperatures on winter wheat in Kansas, as Romulo noted there's a brand new article out in the E-Update series, a special edition being released just yesterday, and you can find that at agronomy.ksu.edu. Thanks, Romulo, for coming over and lending us your update.
No problem, Eric. Thank you. And if producers want to reach out to me as well, make sure that you follow me on Twitter or Facebook. And either one, the handle is at KSU Wheat.
Romulo Lollato, wheat production specialist, K-State Research and Extension, our guest on this opening part of Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and continuing on now, want to inform you more about the Feed Science and Management Program at Kansas State University, one of the components of the Grain Science and Industry Department here at K-State. And the grand opportunities for young people embarking on careers to get into this field and to succeed in it. Joining us now is a feed scientist at K-State, relatively new to the faculty here at the university. Chad Paulk is his name. Chad, welcome back to K-State. It's our first time to visit with you since your return, but you spent quite a while here in the curriculum yourself at K-State some years ago, right?
That is correct. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me. So I was born and raised in Waycross, Georgia, right outside the Okefenokee Swamps, so about 45 miles west of the East Coast and north of Florida. I did 4 years at the University of Georgia in the Animal and Dairy Science program, and then at that point decided to come to the Midwest and join K-State for my master's and PhD program.
And what was your attraction to K-State in that respect then?
Really came to K-State to get more around agriculture. I was interested in the livestock nutrition side of things, and Georgia just didn't have a lot of pigs at the time, so the opportunity brought me to K-State to get more exposure.
In fact, you studied swine nutrition as part of your overall program, right?
I did. The majority of my master's program was the relationship between feed processing and swine nutrition, and then got more into the production side with my PhD.
And then a short stint at another land-grant university before you came back here?
That's right. I was at Texas A&M for roughly 3 years, helped develop their swine production program, and did research there on swine nutrition and a little bit of feed processing as well.
So your role back here at K-State now is what then?
So my role here at K-State is more on the feed processing side within the grain science department. I kind of like to be the middleman between the animal science department and the feed science program, really discovering how feed processing interacts with nutrition.
Is that the core of your research program right now, that interaction?
That would be the core of our research program. We do a lot of work on how feed processing influences digestibility of nutrients. There's a lot of new feed additives on the market, and so we investigate how those are handled throughout the feed manufacturing process. So if there's any way they influence flowability of ingredients or material handling, as well as stability throughout the pelleting process, so how they handle temperature and moisture and things of those nature.
Are you looking then more at processed feeds as opposed to simple grain concentrates? Is that the case?
So we do a lot of our research is more on the processed feed side, but we do also do a lot with grain storage and also feed safety. Feed safety is a really important topic now, how different bacteria or viruses can survive within feed ingredients or be introduced into the feed mill. So we do a lot of investigation there, and then also continue on the nutrition side with how the processing actually influences the digestibility of those nutrients.
That dives into such things as particle size as the processing goes on and so forth.
Yep, that is correct. So we look at how energy availability with different particle sizes of grains, as well as if those ingredients are made up of different fiber levels and how that interacts with the particle size as well. And then if you apply heat and moisture via steam in the pelleting process, how that influences the availability of those nutrients.
This is not a new discipline. It's been around a while, but it's apparent that there's a great lot yet to be learned as we go along then.
That is correct. They've been doing research for a long time now, and with ever-changing genetics of animals as well as feed ingredients, really a lot of the opportunity also relies within utilizing byproducts from the food industry or other industries, and how do we find a home for those to actually bring value to them to feed our animals.
So it really is, Chad, a dynamic field, is it not?
That is correct.
Yeah. And that's what brings you over here in part to share the story of the feed science and management curriculum, and we don't want to overlook that latter part. That's no small consideration, right?
That is correct. We have a lot of opportunities for students. It's kind of a curriculum that is somewhat a diamond in the rough. There's only one curriculum or full 4-year major within the U.S., and that is here at K-State. It provides a lot of topics we cover for those students, from anywhere from grain handling, feed processing and pelleting, animal nutrition, feed quality and safety, and then we also even get into the pet food side of things.
And when you pitch the program to students, what sorts of skills do they need to have well in hand as they would come into this curriculum?
Really, when they just come into it, they need to be enthusiastic, ready to learn, and take advantage of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity for jobs within our field. With the feed science and management, we have 100% job placement. And throughout this curriculum, they're really going to develop skills and apply the skills they already have in terms of critical thinking, leadership, scientific analysis, communication, task management, and also some analytical as well.
They do have to have that acumen toward the science, don't they?
That is correct. Yep, so applying the science, the nutrition, the people management, as well as some engineering with the equipment.
You mentioned the 100% placement of graduates from this program. Just illustrate, if you would, some of the specific career paths that are out there.
Yeah, there's really a lot of career opportunities. We have students that go a lot of different directions. To really kind of classify those, plant operations would be a big one, whether it's feed mill management. If you're on the pet food side, it can be anything to a pet food canning facility to a dry pet food process as well. So plant operations is a big one. Quality control, which will get into evaluating ingredients if you're purchasing corn or soybean meal, all the way to what's the quality of your final product, making sure you're producing what you're expected to produce. Process and facility design as well. So those who are a little more interested in the engineering side of things, the design side of things, on the equipment side or the process and facility side. R&D is a big one as well for people interested in creating new products for livestock feed, as we discussed earlier, or new products on the pet food side. Based on marketing trends, the research and development really comes in, especially when it comes to incorporating new ingredients into these mixtures. Equipment and engineering, for those with more of an engineering focus but want to be involved with agriculture and nutrition, there's a lot of opportunity on the equipment side of things, as well as the ingredient procurement, so purchasing corn and soybeans, different things of that nature.
There's quite some diversity in that lineup, isn't there?
There is. It's kind of the middle piece to a lot of different areas to bring it all together, to take different products using different pieces of equipment while managing people, and then bringing it all together to provide nutrition to feed livestock, humans, pets, all of those things.
This is, it would appear, an area of rapid growth, this industry then.
I believe so. There is a lot of growth, especially as our population grows and we're trying to produce more meat to feed people. We have to produce more feed to feed those animals. And then you also have the growth on the pet food side of things, with more and more people having more household pets and having to feed them as well.
And as you say, the graduates from this program are in high demand. That puts them in a competitive position to start off well in their careers, financially and otherwise.
Very competitive. So a lot of opportunity.
And one thing we do not want to forget to mention, and that is this revolves, at least in a fair part, around the still relatively new and very much worldwide state-of-the-art facility, the Cruz Feed Mill here on the campus.
That is correct. The OH Cruz Feed Mill provides a great opportunity for students. It allows us to give them that hands-on experience through class. We have a lot of our labs out at the feed mill. The feed mill also employs a decent percentage of our student body. Most of those come from the feed science major, but also other majors as well has students that work out at the feed mill. And then that's where we conduct all of our research for our feed science program, as well as make feed for all the farms here at K-State.
And for those who have not seen the feed mill, it is cutting-edge technology, probably unparalleled in the world, isn't it?
It is. It is a very nice feed mill. We're very fortunate to have it here at K-State.
And so that is very much a centerpiece of this feed science and management program here at Kansas State University, one of the kind here in this country. And there is information aplenty out there, Chad, for anybody interested in the basics of the program itself and how to pursue this area of study, right?
That is correct. You can always go onto the KSU website and search the Feed Science and Management Program or the Department of Grain Science to get more information. And if you're ever on campus doing a tour of campus, trying to decide if K-State's right for you, we'll always have our doors open and welcome you to come say hello and be happy to share more information with you.
It is certainly, again, proving its worth within the Grain Science and Industry Department. It is a focal point for young people looking to get into a very high-quality career in the area of feed science and management. Again, you can go to grains.ksu.edu, and as Chad mentioned, you'll find all the details there. Chad, a pleasure. We'll look forward to talking with you again soon. Thanks for your time right here.
Thanks for having me.
Chad Paulk is his name. He's a feed scientist here at Kansas State University, grains.ksu.edu for more on this field of feed science and management and how to pursue a career in it. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll have more in a moment on this, the K-State Radio Network.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to the K-State Radio Network and Agriculture Today. Welcome back. Eric Atkinson here. Now today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue is slated to announce the second and final round of trade aid for farmers and ranchers impacted by the retaliatory tariffs on or around December the 3rd. That confirmed by Farm Service Agency Administrator Richard Fordyce. Producers who already applied and qualified for the first tranche of $4.7 billion in direct payments will automatically be eligible for the next batch. The application period will remain open until January the 15th. Meantime, Secretary Perdue also recently said that the aid amounts for the second installment would not change from the initial levels. That ran counter to his comments just a few weeks ago that the aid they could change once the benefits for the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement were figured into that. The U.S. Chief Agricultural Trade Negotiator, meantime, recently outlined the importance of reaching an ag trade deal with Japan in an expedient fashion. Here's more from the USDA's Rod Bain.
Time is of the essence for the U.S. to reach a new bilateral trade agreement with Japan. That's according to the chief ag negotiator for the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, Greg Dowd. Speaking to farm broadcasters recently about the importance from the ag trade perspective,
they're absolutely a critical market for us when it comes to beef, pork, and poultry. And we've got a real challenge here in that Japan has deals that are going to enter into place soon with Australia and Canada. And I believe it's about April of next year they have a deal coming with the European Union. And so we've got to move quickly here, or we're going to not have the same level playing field. Those countries are going to have lower tariffs into Japan than we are. And we recognize that and plan to address that as quickly as we can.
Ambassador Dowd says under Trade Promotion Authority timelines, the goal is to begin negotiations with Japan at the start of 2019, targeting a culmination by the end of March. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
A year into his second stint as EPA's Region 7 administrator, Jim Gilliford says he remains committed to compliance over enforcement in working with agriculture and other industries in the four-state region, including Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, and Nebraska. Gilliford visited with DTN last week at the EPA regional office in Lenexa, just after the EPA acting administrator Andrew Wheeler had signed a proposed rule in the office seeking to amend the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act to exempt animal livestock emissions from reporting requirements. Agriculture is the largest economic function in Region 7 by far, which puts producers in contact with water resources and air quality, Gilliford notes. He says still, if there are compliance problems with regulations, the EPA's goal is to get the industry, including agriculture, in compliance as quickly as possible. Gilliford reiterated the importance of maintaining good communication with farmers, ranchers, and agribusiness. The administrator pointed out water quality remains the major challenge in the region, one EPA shares with the states. That includes nutrient runoff from agriculture. Quoting Gilliford, farmers do a good job with their nutrient management, but nitrates in particular, or phosphorus in its soluble form, or erosion situations released into state and local waters cause problems from an environmental standpoint. In anticipation of the calving season, K-State Research and Extension will be hosting quite soon a series of calving schools. The first takes place this week, outlining the normal calving process as well as tips to handle difficult calving situations there. And there will be several topics at each of these, including proper bull and heifer selection and EPDs, winter cow nutrition, injection site management, and more. The first of these will be coming up this Thursday, November the 15th, at Goodland. It'll start at 6 o'clock in the evening there. There are more of these beef calving schools at various locations around the state. Full information can be found at ksubeef.org. Now this week's edition of Milk Lines with K-State Dairy Specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I'd like to discuss with our Kansas dairy farmers some concerns as we head into winter when we think about our dairy herds and some of the things that we need to maybe tighten up on as we prepare for winter. One of those chores that you probably should have on your list is where are you at with the hoof trimming in your herd. You know, as we come out of summer, and I know summer seems like it was maybe a long time away, but the effects that we see on the hooves of animals is probably just a real issue right now on our dairy farms. The reason for that is due to hoof growth. It usually takes about 60 to 90 days before we actually see the effects of heat stress show up as we trim animals and as we see lameness in our herds. So right now is probably a prime time to see some of those issues pop up in the hooves of the animals. So what should you be looking for? Well, one of the things you need to probably be thinking about is those animals that may be having a little bit of trouble with locomotion, i.e. they have a higher than expected locomotion score. So what should you do about that? Well, really the idea is you need to get the animal on the trim table. So if you have someone come from the outside to trim your herd and they haven't been there in a while, it's probably a good idea to get them scheduled in here in the next month or so you can get the hooves looked at prior to the winter weather. So some of the things that you need to really pay attention to are cases of hairy warts. If we can get those healed up now, probably be a good idea as we head into the winter. Generally in the wintertime, we do have some issues with frozen manure and ice and frozen dirt. Those things tend to cause some abrasion to the hoof, which can make things like hairy warts actually worse. The other challenge that we have is that a lot of times in the wintertime it's very difficult to use foot baths. So in your foot bath program, if you've been a little bit lax due to harvest and some other things here at the end of the summer and early fall, time to get back on that and get back on that fairly quickly as well as often in the herd. Probably at least 3 times a week, maybe 5 days a week for the next several weeks. Some of the things you need to be thinking about is the treatment that you might use in that foot bath. If you're accustomed to using formaldehyde as your chemical of choice, you might want to back off of that as temperatures get cooler, as it's less effective. Might want to move to some of the other options that are out there. Could be copper sulfate, could be some of the organic acids that we have available today. Again, those are generally more effective as we go into cooler weather and looking at wintertime temperatures as well. So I encourage our dairy farmers today to get out and check on the locomotion scores of their dairy animals. If they haven't had the hoof trimmer in a while, probably a good idea to get the hoof trimmer rounded up and to your farm before winter sets in. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Mike. And this is Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
This Agriculture Today closes out on wildlife management. Once more, Charlie Lee joins us, wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, today we'll get into a new study out of Texas, and it evaluated the impact of a specific class of insecticides on bobwhite quail. And this particular insecticide compound has received due attention, to say it that way, in recent times.
This neonicotinoid insecticides have been used in the United States since the mid-1990s. They're somewhat less toxic to birds than organophosphates and carbamates that they've tended to replace. There are several different neonicotinoids that are currently on the market, and imidacloprid has been the one that's most frequently applied, although there's certainly several other of these insecticides. They're very effective at controlling many of the common chewing and sucking insect pests. They're used on cereals, fruits, ornamentals, vegetables, cotton, potatoes, home and lawn, and even veterinary purposes. They are a systemic product, meaning that once they're applied, they're distributed throughout the plant as it grows, thus making that plant toxic to feeding insects. They're most frequently applied as an insecticidal seed treatment. And since they were registered, The prophylactic use of these insecticidal seed treatments has increased dramatically. They're highly water-soluble, and they have long half-lives. All of these characteristics lead to their persistence in the environment.
And that persistence is welcomed by those who use the products, but the toxicity level has raised concerns in the native wildlife populations out there.
Yeah, the neonicotinoids use increased because of presumably their low vertebrate toxicity. However, the research is somewhat conflicting on vertebrate toxicity. There is some data that shows their use corresponds with declines in farmland birds. I think that was part of the focus of this particular study. We know that bobwhite quail have experienced steady long-term declines in most states in the United States for at least 30 years. However, the use of neonicotinoids has been taking place for almost that 30-year time frame. The causes for the decline in northern bobwhite quail are really not well defined. We've always assumed they were certainly habitat-related, but have not been able to articulate the exact cause. So this particular project decided to try to focus on the use of these insecticides and see if there was residual in the northern bobwhite population on 3 separate ranches in Texas. The 3 ranches were widely dispersed. There was one kind of in the central part of the state, which was basically a wildlife ranch. It was in the rolling plains. It was dominated by cotton and winter wheat production, and although the particular ranch where the quail were collected on this study site was primarily a wildlife use operation, but they did plant cereal grains, including winter wheat, as wildlife food plots. The other area was in the South Texas Plains field site. That area is dominated by cotton and citrus and sorghum and corn, sunflower, vegetables. Again, the ranch in that general location was managed for trophy hunting, primarily of white-tailed deer and exotic species. And again, they also used some common ag crops for wildlife food plots. The last site was on the Gulf Coast, and it was primarily managed for cattle ranching and upland game bird hunting. And on that site, there was no cultivated crops being planted.
So those who conducted this study captured bobwhite quail from each of those sites and, again, analyzed them for neonicotinoid residues and physical impacts from the insecticide contact?
Yes, in the 2 years of the project, they collected 57 samples, both in the spring and in the fall. During necropsy, they recorded all of the external and internal abnormalities, did a good chemical screening, including liver, kidney, spleen, and gonadal tissues to look for neonicotinoid residues. Of the 57 liver samples that they analyzed, they detected neonicotinoid compounds in 12% of those. When looking through the necropsy work, they found a considerable amount of tissue abnormalities in gonadal tissues. So basically the summary was that about 30% of the bobwhites that they collected were either exposed to the neonicotinoids in the environment or showed evidence of tissue damage that corresponds to known results from neonicotinoid toxicity. So I think what this comes down to is that we perhaps have a class of insecticides that were at least originally thought to be safer than what they were replacing, and perhaps there are more effects out there than we had first realized when those products were first being registered.
So this will likely, Charlie, lend to the ongoing debate over the use of these compounds, particularly in wildlife-sensitive areas.
I suspect that we will continue to see other states here in the United States put some restrictions on sites that these products can be utilized in.
And once more, those were the general results out of a series of field studies in Texas looking at the potential impact of the insecticide class neonicotinoids on bobwhite quail. Charlie, we appreciate the word on this. He's a wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. As we wrap up today's edition, again, to listen to the podcast version of our broadcast, go to agtoday.net. Or using your podcast app on your mobile device, you can type in the keywords Agriculture Today, Kansas, and you'll find the program. You tap the subscribe button there, and brand new episodes of the broadcast automatically will arrive on your device every weekday. Start by going to agtoday.net. In the meantime, thanks for being with us right here today. Please rejoin us tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.